Hola, First Gen. You are listening to First Gen Healing, a podcast on Latinx healing and awakening journeys. My name is Priscila Luna. I am your host, and I'm really excited because today I invited a guest that shares some of the experiences that I've experienced in my journey, just in a different way. So before we get into it, I definitely want to let today's guest introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. I'm so excited to be one of the first guests. And my name is Yasmeen Alzate, and I am just someone on my healing journey. And I've been making content about the journey, sharing the ups and the downs and everything in between. And I particularly share my journey on struggling with like anxiety and agoraphobia and panic disorder. I also have a podcast. And yeah, I'm so excited to be here. And thank you for having me.
Of course. I want to start off with you telling us a little bit about your upbringing.
Yeah, so I actually was born in Colombia. I was
Mm.
adopted and I was brought here to the US. And luckily, my family's all Colombian though, so I still have my culture. I'm very grateful for that.
Nice.
But growing up here in the US, I was fortunate enough to be able to go back to Colombia almost every summer as
Mm.
a kid. So I grew up very close to my culture, regardless of if I was, here.
Hmm.
I was in folkloric dancing, like I was in my
Wow.
culture. But I think all in all, I had a pretty traditional, like American upbringing, public school, and I'm from Chicago. So I was
Mm.
always in a melting pot of cultures. And I feel like that's also why my personality or my way of being in the world is very just like open to all different kinds of people because I was in a city.
My podcast is about healing and awakening journeys. So I would love to know if one resonates more than the other or what you consider yourself kind of going through.
I would say that when it comes to an awakening and a healing journey, that I have at different points in my life where I've had moments of awakening, right? But
Hmm.
I am on my journey of healing currently right now,
Mm.
because I am every single day working to be better than yesterday. And I don't mean that from like a negative standpoint. I mean it in the sense of like moving forward into a new reality of becoming the higher version of myself that I know is within me, but is still held back by a lot of fears and internal struggles and stuff that I'm working through. So I would say I'm on the healing journey that has been triggered by different moments of my own awakening. That's how
Mm.
I would define it within myself.
Ooh, I love that. It's kind of like the focal point is healing, of course, and then
Mhm.
throughout it, there's been moments of awakening. Oh, how beautiful. Okay. And so, when would you say this has kind of started for you? I think everyone may define that differently as well, right? But for me, it's kind of like when were you intentful about, something is off and I need to change it?
So for me, honestly, I would say it this way. It feels like the universe kicked me, right? Or hit me
Mm.
in the face. I mean, and not in a violent way, right? But
Yeah.
it feels that way. It feels like my body, my soul just hit me because I was starting to avoid, hold, resent, all of these things and these negative energies, negative emotions I was building up inside of myself. And there's different points in my life where it was like, you need to stop and look at what you're doing, right? And
Mm.
one of the first times for sure was when I felt like my body was finally telling me, I'm not going to let you not face what you're not facing anymore. Right. So
Okay.
when I was in college, I had a very scary, like panic attack situation. And that is what triggered my healing journey, my awakening journey. That's what triggered it because it was like something within me is telling
Mm-hmm.
me that it is time to face what I've been holding inside of my body for a really long time, right?
This is one of our shared experiences. So I'm going to kind of set the stage for how I experienced that same sensation, let's say. I would consider myself someone that was always in a hurry through life, achievement after achievement, more
Mhm.
so just the stepping stones of here's how you get to the American dream. So I graduated high school when I was 16, actually, because I skipped a grade.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I was like in a hurry. I graduated high school at 16, graduated college at 21, and then just went right into my, corporate job. Of course, worked through college as well and was studying and all of that. But I think when I started to feel the bodily sensations, right, that was in my dream job, surprisingly. And it was a job that required a lot of me, was teaching me a lot, and on paper looked amazing. So I'm going to leave it there so that I can let you set the scene too.
Yeah. So similar to you, right? I feel like we start to act on a culture of always going, always doing, and not addressing, right? Just kind of continuing on with life with brute force, right? Not with
Yes.
no ease and no gentleness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like I also was starting to hit a brick wall, right? Ever since I was younger, I feel like my culture, my identity, and also how I saw myself was a big influence on how I was in the world and what I did. So because I was adopted, because I know where I came from, because I know what my life could have been, I always had this like impending weight on me that I needed to make something of myself and not like echar a perder the opportunity that I got that other people don't get, right? And
Absolutely.
I've had to multiple different times in my life like reframe that thinking and think, I'm not letting it go to waste, right? I'm doing my best and that's all I can do. And I have to remind myself that by divine intervention, I was given a second chance, so I must have a purpose, right? But a lot of times in my life, I've steered away from that and used it as a way to think, well, I'm not worth the life of my dreams, if that makes sense. So I was always trying to overcompensate, always trying to be the best in this. I was doing extracurriculars all the time. I was working since I was 14 too. And I was always very creative and all these things. So I was always on go, go, go mode too. I ended up going to college too, but that first year, I started getting that physical sense that I was like, this is not for me. The only reason why I went was because my family, my friends, people at school, counselors were just like, there's no way that you cannot go to school. Like you have too much to lose, your test scores, your grades, your extracurriculars, like all these things, like you are set up to go to wherever you want to go. But I ended up going to like a school I didn't really want to go to that was here close to home because I was like, you know what, let me go. Right. And I left home, I moved out because I really wanted to get that experience, right? And then I started getting it. And it was like, hold on, girl. Like, what are you doing? You know, I
Yeah.
was trying to run away, you know, and that's what was happening. I was trying to run away from myself, from my trauma, and from things that were happening in my life. I was trying to run away all high school, all throughout high school. So then once I hit the real world, it was like,
Something was waiting for you.
yeah.
I think you made an important distinction, which is the pressure that's internal and also external. That internal pressure that you mentioned, which I absolutely felt, and I know a lot of fellow first gens feel as well, which is I need to make my parents' sacrifice worth it. My life has to be good in some way so that it proves that, you know, what was given up for my life is worth it, right?
Yep.
So there's that internal clock that's already running on high from the moment that you're in elementary school. I
Literally.
remember hearing like, no sabes lo que dimos para estar aquí, y todo lo que hacemos para darte todo lo que necesitas. So those words are like ingrained in my brain, and that ran my internal clock. And it was always, like you said, out of brute force. It was like never soft and easy and graceful, nothing like that. Then on the other end, there's the actual exterior pressure, which at a society level or at the American dream level, it's like achievement after achievement. Your worthiness comes from what you do, not who you are.
Yep.
And also there's already a lot of like steps or goals that are set out for you from a very young age. Get good grades in high school, do extracurricular activities, get to the best school, graduate, go to corporate, now climb the corporate ladder. It's kind of like a never ending, you know,
Nope.
a list of goals that you have to achieve. And so, yeah, I just wanted to make those two, like point those two journeys out because I think that they're so important. And usually we have both of them playing a part in our lives. I want to talk about maybe the moments before because I think those are just as important, and hopefully we can also educate people on what that starts to feel like before you get to that breaking point, you know, because I'm sure some maybe have already experienced a breaking point, but maybe some are at those starting initial feelings of something is wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
hopefully we can, share what that actually can look like or feel like in our lives so that you can start to make a change before you're kind of forced to.
So where I'd like to start with that is that I want the listener to kind of like ask themselves a question because I wish at the time that I had thought about this, right? I just didn't know. But when you start to feel like something is off, I think one of the most important things to do is to ask yourself, what is within me that is actually happening? What is my body trying to tell me? What in my life is quote unquote out of control? Because if we stop to ask ourselves these questions, it gives ourselves and our body a chance to reflect and think about what it could be. Versus at the time, I was very much just ignoring it. I was like, no, no, nothing's wrong, nothing's wrong. Push it away.
And what
Right.
were some of those things you were ignoring? What was your body kind of like starting to tell you?
I feel like one of the biggest things was that I was starting to get really burnt out. And I didn't know what burnout was. And I
Mm.
honestly think that I really learned what burnout was still like 2 years ago when it got to the worst it's ever been, right?
Okay.
But for me, I just feel like I was in a relationship that was really not for me, right? I was at a school I didn't want to be at. I was studying something I did not want to study. I didn't have many friends where I was. So all in all, I just felt like I was very isolated, right?
Mm.
Isolated and in a controlling relationship. I was doing all of this, and then I was also dealing with a lot of family drama that I'm very thankful that it's taken, yes, all this time ever since then. And that's like what, since 2016 to get to a
Mm.
place where we're finally on like a loving, healing, and understanding level. And that's why I say to the people, if you're going through trauma with your family, the most important thing is patience, right? But at the time, none of the trauma in my family was addressed, right?
Mm.
Nothing was addressed. I within myself was still struggling with addressing my own trauma. So it's
Mm-hmm.
almost as if everything in my life was just a chaotic mess, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had nothing that I was like agreeing with, if that makes sense. I wasn't even doing anything for me. I was living my
Mm.
life for everyone else. I was living my life for what I thought society wanted me to do, for what my partner wanted me to do, for everyone else but Yasmeen, but myself, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
And I think that how that can start to show up in your body is potentially, I'll say, for myself, when I started this job, I was really excited. And like you said, maybe outwardly everyone was satisfied with what you were doing,
Mhm.
but you weren't realizing you were actually the one that wasn't satisfied
Yeah.
because we, maybe are used to living our lives for others' eyes, right? Is everyone else okay with what I'm doing? Okay, cool. Then that's what
Mhm.
I should be doing. So I'll say like bodily sensations or how my body started to show up for me and tell me, hey, something is wrong, is anxiety was a everyday thing.
Oh
So
yeah.
there was not a day where I did not experience anxiety.
Mhm.
And it wasn't something that I could go to a family member for because they weren't necessarily educated on it. They thought and said, you're just nervous. It's a big deal. You have your dream job. It's a good job. Um, or it's normal. It's a new thing. Like you're just going to get used
Mhm.
to it. But on my day to day, I remember that at first it was like just anxiety every time I met a new client. So I was going to
Mhm.
different businesses driving there, and on my way there, I would get really, really nervous and sweaty. And as I was driving, this job required me to drive alone a lot. I started to feel like I couldn't breathe.
Mhm.
So it was a regular thing that I had to turn on my AC to feel the air. I had my peppermint oil
Yep.
and I would like put it on my finger and smell that. And then it started to get worse. So I
Mhm.
would wake up and I would feel like throwing up. And I thought maybe I'm just not eating right. But it was so interesting because truly no one else kind of like pointed their fingers at something is wrong. It was really just like, it's normal, you're just nervous, that kind of stuff. So I would say that's how my body started showing up for me. Also, the energy that I used at work was like depleted after it. So after work, coming home and numbing out. So that could look like just watching TV all day. It could look like having two dinners, like food, numbing out with food. I would order There were like in the dark days, let's say, I would order a dinner, eat that early dinner, let's say 5. And then by like midnight, I was still up, still numbing, still, trying to forget that I was not okay with my life. And I'll say at that moment, I didn't know that that was what was happening.
And I think that's a key point too, right? Is that a lot of the times when we're first going through it, we don't know what's actually happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're someone listening to this and you're starting to feel that like, oh, something isn't right, like listen to yourself, That's the most important part is listen to yourself because that's something that I know I wasn't doing.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's a big internal struggle with the external like relationships we have in our life because it's exactly what you said, Priscilla, that people were kind of telling you, well, no, it's just because you have a good job. It's just because you have a new job, right? Just because it's something different. And then people were telling me the same thing. Well, it's just a big, change in your life. And I'm like, well, it is. I don't disagree, right? But the issue is that a lot of times the people that are external to us want to dim down or lower that anxiety that you might be trying to explain that you're having, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I was doing where I was like, no, but like I'm just always anxious all the time, right? Like it wouldn't go away. I was just like always stressed out, always, up to here kind of a thing. And it was a similar response from everyone in my life. It was like, no, no, like it's okay, it's okay. One of the most important things is that I myself wasn't listening to myself anymore.
Mm.
For me, I was listening to what everyone was saying and was saying I was fine.
Yeah.
Nothing was happening. And I chose to believe it when I knew something wasn't right inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't taking care of myself either. I wasn't taking care of my soul. I don't think I had a relationship with my soul in the first place. I
Mm.
didn't have a relationship with myself. I didn't know how to do that at all. I didn't even know I could do that, right? For me,
Yeah.
I was just simply acting right on what I needed to do. I wasn't going within myself or listening to myself at all. And for you, I know like it was coming up when you were driving, right? For me, it honestly happened out of the blue. I was at a grocery store. It just hit me. And I literally
Mm.
told my partner, take me to the hospital right now. Something is wrong. Like you need to take me right now. Because I felt like everything was caving in around me. I was losing all control of everything. I was blacking out, whatever. Like I was just full on like having a moment, right?
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
And we ended up going to the hospital. And I remember telling the people at the hospital like everything that was going on, my heart, that everything I couldn't breathe, everything. And of course, to them, I'm sure that they thought, well, this girl's 18. She's not having a heart attack. It must be just anxiety and panic. But at the time, I didn't know what that was. I had never experienced it to that degree.
Yeah.
Right. So then I was like, you know what? We're gonna sit and wait. I waited, I kid you not, Priscilla, for like 4 hours there the
Wow.
whole time just in my mind. And I was just like, how am I going to get out of this? I was honestly thinking about saying bye to my family members already because I didn't know what was happening to me. And that's why I am so passionate about sharing my journey with panic disorder and anxiety because people don't know how real it can get, how scary it can get. Being, especially the first time, you think you're
Yeah.
losing your mind. You think that nothing is ever going to be the same. You think that you're dying. I mean, trigger warning, but it's true because it's that bad. So that's why I advocate so much for it because in that moment, I was literally imagining saying bye to my loved ones because I didn't know what was wrong with
Wow.
me. And then they told me, no, your heart is fine, everything's fine, you're 18, but we'll run tests. They ended up changing the medication they had given me, which is actually what ended up causing that episode because the medicine they had given me was lowering my heart rate, and I was very young to be taking something like that. So that's what
Mm.
caused that reaction, like
Mm.
worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
But everything was fine. And they told me you're fine. Keep on going
Wow.
on with your life.
You were 18, you said, when you
That was
first
the
got
first
your
time.
panic attack. Okay. My story's a little bit different. I was 25, I think, when I got my first one.
Hmm.
And I'll just talk a little bit about what that actually looked like. So I was in that job for about a year, and then I took my first vacation. So I was in Orlando going to Disney World. I had a great time. I was feeling so much gratitude for making the income that I was making and for having that spending money, right? And being able to go on vacation for a week. And on my flight back,
Mm-hmm.
I was flying back alone. I started to feel anxiety again, right? I was like, oh, shoot, okay, I need my air, I need my
Mm-hmm.
peppermint oil. And then it started to get a little bit worse. And I was like, why do I feel my right side of my face is numb?
Oh, yep.
This
I've
has
had that
never
one too.
happened
Yep.
before. So I took out some gum because I thought, okay, I just need to feel, and it was like, these were my tools and they usually helped a little bit. Now, I want to say something. I knew I had anxiety, and when I would mention it to family, they would say, don't look into it more because then you're just going to
Mm.
cause the other symptoms. That's what they would say, right? And so whenever I would like, let's say maybe I'm going through or scrolling through Instagram and there's like tools for anxiety and stuff, if I saw panic, I would like scroll through it because I was like,
Mm.
no, because I don't want to like trick my brain into getting it, which is so silly looking back, right? I didn't have tools for a panic attack and I didn't know exactly how it would feel, but I just knew that my face was going numb and if I touched it,
Mm-hmm.
it felt numb. I couldn't swallow. It's like I had forgotten how to swallow and I was freaking out and my heart was beating super fast. And so I'm Mexican and I don't know if it's a Mexican thing, but it takes me forever to ask for help. And that's something that I work
Mm-hmm.
on with my clients and myself. But at the time, it took me forever. I was feeling to the point where, like you said, I thought, okay, this is the end. I'm literally going to die on an airplane. Fine.
Mm.
Well, I might as well ask for help.
Yeah, you're like, como que ahora sí.
Okay, pues, okay, I'll tell someone that I'm about to die.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell the flight attendant, I'm like, hey, I don't know what's happening to me, but something is wrong, and I need help.
Mm.
And she takes me to the back and she sits me down. She starts asking me questions. She gives me a snack. And basically, I think she knew right away, like that there wasn't anything like super wrong. But I, in my
Mm.
head, was like, what is this lady doing? Why is she asking me questions? Does she not understand I'm about to die? Like,
Yeah, you're like, excuse me, this is not the time for questions.
I don't want to tell you about my trip.
You're
Something
like, I
is
want to tell you
really
about
wrong.
Disneyland.
Yeah, and so I'm like, I don't need snacks, it's not working. But it's funny. I mean, now it's funny, but
Now
anyway,
we can
so
laugh, right?
yeah, now I can
Yeah.
laugh, but I wasn't laughing then. And she made me like walk up and down the airplane aisles.
Really?
And yeah,
Oh,
she was like distracting me, I think. And
hmm. Yeah.
then she ended up just talking to me and she asked me like about my job or like kind of
Mm-hmm.
I told her, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go back to work." And basically in that conversation I realized I was so stressed about going back to work that I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it was triggered for that reason.
Yeah.
And so for me, this was a huge turning point, I feel, for my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like I came back and said, I never want to experience this again,
Yeah.
and I'm about to change my life however I need to because I don't want to feel this again. So I want to go back to your story and ask you what happened after that first time where you were like, okay, something really big happened and it's maybe signaling that something is wrong. What kind of transpired after that?
I think that what started to happen was an inevitable spiral into what was actually happening, right?
Mm.
So I dropped out of school. I was like, I can't do this anymore. This isn't for me. And then I actually got an email about this opportunity to go to Colombia to go do an internship. And I was like, you know what?
Mm.
Something about this feels like what I'm supposed to be doing. So that way I'm not just like not doing anything when I'm not in school, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then I said, you know what? I'm gonna go. I made my money I needed to go to do the program. I went, and I was only supposed to be there for 6 weeks, right? And before I left, I had even like told people that I knew, I was like, what if I go there and my anxiety gets worse? And I was already like every
Mm-hmm.
single day struggling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And something inside of me was like, it's not, right? But I had the fear. But I ended up going and like magic, sana sana colita de rana, like my shirt, it disappeared, right? I got there and I was magically cured, if you want to put it that way, right? So aside from what I was doing there, I was working with kids that were in adoption homes and in foster care. I was doing the work that I had wanted to do my whole life ever since I was a kid, give
Mm-hmm.
back to those kids and really get into like nonprofit work and giving back to my community. That honestly changed my life. I had so many amazing, beautiful experiences. I ended up staying for 2 years. And I was only supposed to be there
Wow.
for 6 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So I ended up staying there for 2 years. And a lot of it was because of what I was doing, right? But I think deep down it was because I was happy that I was finally able to live my life with no fear. I would
Mm.
literally say, you know, I don't care if somebody robs me in the middle of the street. I don't care if somebody kills me. I don't care because I'm in Colombia and I'm happy and I'm doing what I love. And you could not
Oh.
catch me, you hell no catch me saying that now. You know what I mean? Like I was just in a place of total bliss and harmony with what I was doing, right? I was fulfilling a passion, a desire that I had. So my anxiety naturally flew away from me.
Mm.
And then when I made the choice to move back home, it was 2 days before I had to come back. And I remember I was sitting with this little girl in my lap. I was at an orphanage. We were doing our activity of the day, and I had a panic attack. Literally. And I very slowly I like picked her up and I was like, Toma. And I got up and I went to the balcony. And the first thing that I heard inside of me was, welcome, here we go again.
Oh no.
Because I was coming back home.
Yeah.
And what my body was literally doing was it was telling me it is time to face what you ran away from. I literally ran away from things for 2 years. That was why I
Yeah.
wanted to stay there.
Yeah.
And something inside of me knew it was time to come home. And second of all, that anxiety attack again told me it is time. And I couldn't avoid it. So then I end up coming home on the plane. I was really struggling on the way home. Similar thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the señora next to me estaba rezando. She was praying, and I was like, you know what? This lady, she got us. I was like, she got us. She's praying, and I
Yeah.
and I literally told myself I didn't do it, right? But I knew I could have. But I told myself this señora next to me, she's praying. She seems like a really sweet lady, and I was with myself traveling, um, and I was like, if I need to grab her hand or ask her if we can hold hands, I think she'll be fine with it. And I used that as a way to calm myself down. And then I got back home, and I remember that car ride home, things felt different.
Mm.
Everything just felt different because I think that internally I knew that it was time to face my trauma. It was just time. And
Mm.
ever since then, now that I'm saying, I don't think I've ever said that. I don't think I've ever realized that ever since I got back, the air felt different. Everything felt different. And it was because I knew it was time. I couldn't keep on living that way of ignoring things anymore. Yep.
Wow. So powerful. And it's powerful that I think you mentioned your inner voice twice, and it was like
Mhm.
once before you headed out, and then once when you came back.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking, you said I was scared, right? Like I didn't know what my trip to Colombia was gonna bring, but something
Mhm.
inside of me told me I'd be okay.
Yep.
It's so interesting because after my panic attack and when I came back, I had a similar experience. So, what had happened with me was that prior to starting this job, I had my grandma pass, and
Mhm.
then 2 months later, an uncle of mine passed who I was really close with. So, like you said, I kind of just sped up through life. And even though those two big things had happened, I started my new job and I just kind of kept going, right?
Yeah.
So, when I decided to resign my job without a backup, it was the first time that I made a decision solely for myself, which is crazy to say because I was already in my late 20s, let's say. But I realized that this decision was not going to make anyone proud.
Mhm.
Like to resign from a job that was paying me well, to not have a backup, it was a decision that I made that was not for anyone else's eyes but my own. And even though I was really scared and I was financially independent, lived on my own, no one else was going to pay my bills or anything like that, a similar voice told me it's going to be okay, but it's time.
Yep.
So it's so crazy. The voice isn't loud, but it was just this knowing that
Mhm.
something was going to come out of these months, that I was going to be unemployed, that there was stuff that I had to deal with that I had like pushed and shoved away. And it was more than just the mourning of, my past family members. But yeah, so interesting that you kind of heard the same voice and that it kind of led you into that journey.
What you were sharing about your inner voice and how we both heard it in those different times of desperate need, I would say, is that something that you said is very key, and it reminded me of something that I've heard, and it's, you know how you said that it was soft,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was sometimes a whisper or just kind of not loud, and something inside of us chooses to say, you know what, let's listen to this, even though it's really low and like kind of, small. But what I wanted to say about that was that I've heard people say that your ego is loud, your fears
Mm,
scream, your ego screams, and it declares things loud and abrupt and very like, let's to the point, right? But that when
mm-hmm,
it's your inner soul, when it's your truth, sometimes it's a whisper, especially if we're
mm,
on the healing journey and we are learning to tap into it, right? It's because our ego and our fears and everything and everyone else, if you hear it loud, it's usually because it's maybe not your thoughts, maybe what you've heard from society, or it's your ego and stuff like that. But I always thought that was interesting because when I am struggling with my anxiety, a lot of times what happens is that I'll hear that like, but what if this happens? But what if this happens? And it's very like harsh and loud.
mm-hmm.
And every time I've listened to that little voice inside of me that's like trying to hold on to hope, it's always not loud. It's just an interesting thought, like to think
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. So you came back from Colombia, and I think that's when, that inner voice, we're going to call it intuition. We're going to name
Hmm.
it. We're going to give it a name. Intuition started to speak with you perhaps 2 years prior, but it was kind of like, hey, I want to take you into a different journey or path,
Yep.
right? And so you started to listen. And I want to fast forward a little bit to maybe what led you to do what you're doing today. Just want to like see, how those aspects led you to your journey now.
So it is 100% intertwined. The reason why I say that is because you know how I said that there was different times in my life where I feel like I've been awakened or kicked in the butt or kind of like forced to look with a wide eye on like what's going on.
Yeah.
I feel like every single time that has happened, I've been doing like my best to learn or to heal or to, just move forward. But it's a common pattern, right? And they
Mm,
always say that life will show you the same thing until you really understand it,
yep.
until you
It
really,
is
yeah, it's a cycle,
a
right? It
cycle.
was it
Yeah.
was going, it was still going. And I think we're all in cycles, right? It'll probably still come, and that's okay, but that's the most important part is that now my perspective is more that's okay, but how can I continue to learn and then act differently and move and really transcend through? And when the pandemic happened, that's another one. It got worse
Mm,
because I had no choice but to look within myself, as I'm sure a lot of us had a similar experience. Is that as scary as the whole pandemic was, what it also did was that it gave us an opportunity in reality where we could not escape ourselves anymore, right? For the better or for the worse. But for me, what it also did was that it pushed me into one of the darkest holes I could possibly ever get into with my mental health, my anxiety, panic attacks almost every single day. It was that
wow.
bad, like really bad. And I would say like bad episodes pretty frequently. But what I didn't know that was doing was that it was trying to tell me, look at me in a way. Look
Mm,
at me, heal me, move through me. It is time, you know, it is time to really face what you've been avoiding. And I know I've said that a lot of times, but it's because it's a journey, it's a process. We can't face it all.
yeah.
We can't heal it all at one point in our lives.
Yeah.
So I think that this was one of those big ones over the past couple of years where I've really dived into that deep end, right?
There can definitely be moments of awareness before there's action. So I will say
Yes.
that too. It sounds like, if you see life presenting something to you, it may be that you're already in the know of what it is. You're like, I already know why this is coming up. But it may take time for you to take action on those things, or it may take another nudge.
It's a good point because I think that I was starting to become hyper aware, hyper vigilant, super aware of everything, but I wasn't ready to take aligned action,
Mm,
you know? So
mm-hmm.
that's why I say I've entered a different phase in my healing journey because I am working on aligned action with the desires that I have, aligned action with the growth that I want to see, with the healing that I want to see, with the reality that I'm working on crafting and I know it's there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why I say it's 100% impacted what I do now is because I decided that it was time to share my journey of struggling with panic disorder and agoraphobia because it's something that I myself don't know anyone in my reality around me that has struggled with agoraphobia. I didn't know what it was until I struggled with it, honestly. And for me, I just felt like if I had the creativity or the opportunity to create and share
Mm-hmm.
my voice and share my truth and everything that I could give to the world, but we have the barrier at the time of a pandemic or the barrier of struggling with agoraphobia of being housebound, I was like, so how can I still share my truth? So then that's how I started getting into, you know what? I think I'm going to make a podcast, right? And I'm going to create and I'm going to share my healing journey. And I'm going to show people that there's no shame in going through the darkest parts of your healing, that we are going to get through it. And I'm in the middle of it, you know, and that's another thing. A lot of times I would look at creators that are struggling with what I struggled with, but they're already healed. Like I don't want to say healed, right? Because we're always healing, but they're already at a point to where they were like out there and like living life, going on planes again and like doing all these things. And I felt like I wasn't there yet. And I remember telling myself, like, who are you to kind of share your healing journey if you're in the middle of it? If you're still struggling to walk a few minutes away from your house. But then I
Mm-hmm.
remembered and I told myself, you know what? That's probably my strong suit. Maybe that's what makes me different is that I'm going to share the journey. I'm going to
Yeah.
share the good days. I'm going to share the bad days. I'm going to share how many freaking times it took me to walk to the corner until now I can walk 30 minutes, you know?
Yeah.
So for me, it's just like I chose to use my story as a fuel now and not use it as what's going to bury me. And I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
let it bury me anymore. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to use it as a fuel and as a fire for myself, but also to share with other people and show other people that we can start to take away the shame. We can start to take away the fear and use it as a way to inspire other people too. And that's kind of
So
like where I
beautiful.
decided to go with it.
Yeah. I love that. I love that because I think that that's like a true testament to alchemizing, right? Or like to facing the shadow, let's say, or those dark parts that are maybe for some people something that's really hard for them to talk about. They may even look at it with shame. And
Yeah.
so bringing it to the light and doing what you do and speaking on the good and the bad parts, I think that that helps others, do the same with theirs. Otherwise, we spend a lot of time burying these things that come up to the surface. They bubble up and we're like, nope, we don't want to face you yet. We're not ready. Go over there. That's not good for my reputation or for the image
Yep.
I have of myself or the image that others have of me. And so I think that that's beautiful. That's actually what I think is the healing journey. It's actually being willing to name the things that are hurting, to face the things that are, coming up to the surface, and to finding ways to, these things are never going to disappear. They're going to be changed, modified. They're going to become, hopefully, something that gives you strength instead of makes you feel weaker, right?
Yeah.
So, just real quick, can you explain to anyone who might not know about panic disorder and agoraphobia, if you can explain a little bit about what that means? Because we heard you say there are people who now are going on flights and going on trips. So, what does it mean to not be? Is that a part of what you're going through?
hmm Yeah, so basically I think that they go hand in hand, right? I have struggled with panic disorder since high school. So I've had it for a very long time. Basically, you're just prone to panic attacks or anxiety attacks. And it's a very physical sensation, right? There are people who struggle with a lot of anxiety, but they never get a panic attack, right? But
Mm,
for me, I've struggled with panic attacks since I was in high school. So there comes a point to where they label it as a panic disorder, right?
I
That
see.
your body has very physical, visceral reactions to panic and fear and stress chronically over time. And then what goes hand in hand with that is that if your panic disorder goes untreated for a very long time, it can turn into agoraphobia. That's just my reality and
Mm,
what I've learned. I'm probably butchering the actual terminology, but basically, I didn't know that what is a result of prolonged panic disorder can turn into agoraphobia because what happens is that when you have a lot of panic attacks, you slowly start to avoid that store where you had a panic attack. You avoid the plane where you had a panic attack.
mm,
You avoid that corner where you had a panic attack. You start to avoid physical locations because your body starts to associate where in the world you're having a panic attack. And
I
it starts to
see.
make your world smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until you feel like your house is the only safe place that you have, where it
Mm,
becomes like not real to go further than a certain radius from your house, or you start to make these mental rules for yourself, even if you don't want to, because your body gets to the point of ultimate survival where you can no longer operate as a normal day-to-day person. I mean, I don't want to say normal, but because you start to avoid and avoid and avoid because you don't want to panic anymore. So that's how it grows into agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is basically, there's different degrees of it. You can be completely housebound to where people cannot leave the house. And I'm going to be so honest with you, when I was younger, I did not understand how people didn't want to go out of their house. I used to hate being at my house. Like, I used to be like, I want to go and do stuff. Like, no. And I honestly did not think that anyone would ever be afraid to leave their house, honestly, until it happened to me. I did not know that this existed. So
Yeah.
that's why I say that and I'm very grateful for it, but TikTok and the ability to create allows us to release shame and get rid of the stigma, because I didn't know it existed until it happened to me.
Yeah.
And once I started going on there and sharing my truth, I started to come into contact with more people that do struggle with it. And it helps you see that you are valid for what you're going through. Agoraphobia, yes, it might not be super common, right? And a lot of people might question, well, why can't you just leave the house? It helps to see that we're not alone.
Yeah.
It can be super rare, but we're not alone. I know some people, it's easy for them to say, well, just leave your freaking house. And I'm like, but do you know the reality of having panic attacks of impending doom every single day?
Yeah.
Not everyone does.
Awareness is so important. And I think that is, also part of the reason we're both creating, right, is to create awareness around all of these types of things so that you stand in your own truth, even if the people around you aren't understanding what you're going through, so that you can validate your own experience, even if the people around you aren't validating it, because sometimes there just isn't that awareness. And if you don't have it either, then you start feeling like there's something super wrong with you and you're the one, right? Instead of realizing, hey, this is actually normal, or this is actually something that is real, right? I'm not making it up, because others can really, with their lack of knowledge, make you feel that way. I knew of someone that didn't leave their house, and I also heard how other people talked about them, right? Like, oh, they're exaggerating, and look at these people, and they're so young, están echando su vida a perder. Like, they can say really hurtful, mean things about what someone is really truly struggling with. So I just wanted to put in there, that is also why I'm creating this podcast, and like in talking about what led us to what we're doing today. This experience that I had was one that made me realize, and also what came after. It would be a super long episode if I extended to the rest of my journey, and I'm not gonna, be able to tell you my whole story now, but the journey itself was really lonely, because there was a lot of lack of awareness in my family. And because also, as you awaken, as you heal, you start to bring those things to the light. And some people don't like that. They've lived their whole lives hiding the truth. And if you're, again, alone in this journey, you might think you're wrong for bringing them out, If you call people out in your family that are not treating you the way they're supposed to be treating you, that did stuff that they shouldn't have done to you, you may be looked at as the bad one, as the one that's too sensitive or too direct. It's very interesting how dynamics work, and how far people will go to defend realities that they feel comfortable in. I was gonna get teary-eyed, but it's just like so true, and it's literally like the root of why I want to make a podcast where we all speak our truths, where we share parts of our journey, because I know it can be lonely, and I don't want you to feel alone. I want you to know that your story is valid, that the things that don't feel right are valid, and I don't want you to back down. I don't want you to numb these things out and forget about them and live a life that feels good to everyone else and not you. I want you to feel good in your own life. And if it takes, validating yourself and hearing these types of stories, then that's what we're going to do.
If your body has gotten to the point to where it is trying to tell you a message, the longer that you ignore it, the harder that is going to hit your body. And take it from me, that has had one of the hardest hits of the body possible, to where I'm learning how to reprogram my whole nervous system at this point. I'm learning how to really understand my body because I ignored it for so long, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're someone who is also doing the same and you have the opportunity to take a moment and say, how can I start healing myself? How can I take care of myself? How can I start to live my life for me sooner rather than later, before your body shuts you down for you, right?
Yeah.
And it's just an important moment. And I also want you to know, if you are someone that's struggling with panic or anxiety or agoraphobia or whatever it may be, is exactly what you said. You're not alone, right? There are people out there that are also living through that reality, and that we are stronger together. And through sharing your truth and being there, and we can reduce the stigma together and know that we're not alone. We can support each other. We can move forward. Share your truth, share your journey, because you don't know who's listening that needed to hear what you have to say, right? You don't know what reality you can change by sharing your truth.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the person listening to this, and I'll say from my example, from my story, does not have agoraphobia or panic disorder or know anything about it, maybe me talking about it can inform them for when someone in their lives lives through it, right?
Yeah,
So we have to just look at everything through that lens of there is so much power in your truth,
absolutely. Yeah.
stand in it. You got it. No giving
Yes.
up. We got this.
Yes. So, for anyone that wants to connect with you or would like to check out your content or podcast, can you please tell us where they can find you?
Of course, yes. So on TikTok, you can follow me at ya.soul. So ya.soul. And then on Instagram, I am ya.soultalk. I also have a website, www.yasoul.life. You can DM me anywhere, or support my podcast project as well. It is called Yasoul, a podcast and soul talk by Yas, where I do soul talks with random people that I've met over TikTok. And that's how I met Priscilla.
Yeah.
Yeah, follow me, check out my stuff, and you won't regret it.
So, the next set of questions are about like resources or things that you have found helpful in your journey. Because first, we wanted to, of course, share with you guys a little bit about our stories and what we've been through. But what I also want to make sure that I do in these episodes is leave you guys with some resources, right? And so, the first thing that I'll ask you is, what is one of your favorite healing or mindful tools that is like your go-to that you use on a regular basis, perhaps?
So on a regular basis, what I use a lot is CBD. It has really helped me aside from the medication that I take. But as far as resources that anyone can access like now, I use the breathwork app a lot, or breathing techniques on YouTube are very beneficial. Any breathwork, we always say, your breath is your life, your breath is your life force. And the more that you can learn to use it to your advantage, you can literally calm yourself down or relax yourself and release.
Awesome. Now, what's a habit that you do for yourself every day?
Oh, I have a habit that is a fairly new one, but it is
Okay.
one that has been helping me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going for a walk every single day and going for a 10-minute run or a bike ride. So, like something either
Mm-hmm.
or, but just being active and instilling physical activity into my day has
Mm-hmm.
tremendously helped my anxiety and my physical sensations. Because since I'm someone that struggles with physical